Good afternoon, and welcome to the European Women's Lobby's online conference to launch our new gender budgeting platform, a tool to channel resources into women's rights. My name is Reka Schafran, the president of the EWL. Thank you all for joining us today. The European Women's Lobby is the largest umbrella organization of women's civil society organizations in Europe, with over 2,000 member organizations in the EU and in candidate countries. EWL envisions a society in which women's contribution to all aspects of life is recognized, rewarded and celebrated in leadership, in care, and in production. All women have self-confidence, freedom of choice, and freedom from violence and exploitation, and no woman or girl is left behind. Budgets play a crucial role in shaping the world we live in, as they mirror political priorities. It should be self-evident that all people should benefit equally from public activities and budgets. In practice, though, we see that's not the case. Gender biases are so entrenched in our societies that doing business as usual when it comes to defining public budgets often means perpetuating gender inequalities. The contribution of women to the economy, often unpaid and undervalued, particularly in this time of pandemic, has been very visible. When looking ahead and beyond the COVID-19 crisis, it is imperative that the EU rethinks care and advancing equality between women and men as a public investment rather than as a matter of public spending. Gender budgeting is a way to achieve this as a more effective budgeting to the benefit of all people. Today, with this conference, we will launch our new dedicated gender budgeting website, which I am sure will prove to be a crucial tool in helping realize this feminist transformation of our economies. We will hear from eminent speakers who will present and discuss the state of play, as well as the future opportunities when it comes to implementing gender budgeting. We invite you to join in the discussion using the Q&A box, as well as on Twitter @European Women. And don't forget to use the hashtags gender budgeting and channeling resources. With that, it is my pleasure to open our conference with the first of our keynote speeches by Helena Dalli, European Commissioner for Equality.
The European Women's Lobby states on the new gender budgeting platform, budgets are not gender neutral. They mirror political priorities and are a powerful tool in transforming our societies. This mirrors the European Commission's political priority on promoting gender equality and women's rights. And it is with this mindset and ambition that the Commission has made gender mainstreaming in the EU budget a priority. In the gender equality strategy, the Commission committed to mainstreaming gender equality throughout all its policies using a methodology to measure gender-relevant expenditure at program level in the current multi-annual financial framework. This gender mainstreaming effort is essential for the EU to achieve its vision of a Europe where women and girls in all their diversity can thrive, lead, and be free. Together with the European Institute for Gender Equality, we are currently developing a tracking methodology in line with the interinstitutional agreement adopted mid-December for tracking gender-relevant expenditures in EU funding programs. We will test this methodology on a number of selected programs before it is rolled out to cover all of the current multi-annual financial program. The increased size of available funding under the Citizens' Equality, Rights and Values program is also a proof of our commitment to protecting and nurturing the fundamental values of the Union, including gender equality. The 1.55 billion euro budget for this program will go to actions that protect our values, improve the lives of people, strengthen our democracy, and turn the gender equality strategy into reality. Implementing this strong commitment properly also includes learning from past practices. The Commission is therefore analysing very carefully the recent recommendations from the European Court of Auditors on gender mainstreaming in the EU budget. Because we are determined to pursue our efforts to improve the institutional framework, gender analysis, as well as reporting on gender equality. This is why I warmly welcome the European Women's Lobby new gender budgeting platform. It will help us improving our methods to advance on empowering women and girls and building a union of equality. I thank you.
We thank the Commissioner for her support of our platform and outlining the commitments of the Commission, and we look forward to working closely with her to realize these important next steps. Now it is my pleasure to introduce Rosa Montero, Secretary of State for Citizenship and Equality in Portugal. Rosa Montero holds a degree in sociology and a doctoral degree in sociology of the state, law and administration. She is a researcher at the Center for Social Studies at the University of Coimbra and at the Center for Social Policies, Labor and Inequalities, and is an assistant professor of the Faculty of Economics at the University of Coimbra. Rosa is an expert of gender equality and is recognized by the European Institute for Gender Equality. She was vice president of the Portuguese Association of Studies on Women between 2012 and 2015. Ms. Montero, the floor is yours.
Thank you, dear President of the European Women's Lobby, dear Reka Safrani, dear all. I thank the European Women's Lobby for launching such an important tool and for organizing this event, and also to the Fondation Chanel for the vision to support this. Let me also address each distinguished speaker individually and thank you for this unique opportunity to learn and create together. This is a moment that we must galvanize. As never before, the impact of budgets and policy decisions on women and men is made evident. And the Portuguese presidency of the Council of the European Union made this a priority. Through aid, we now know that the pandemic had disproportionate impacts on women. For example, we know that there was a sharp decline in women's working hours and activity, and that losses concentrated in feminized sectors. Today, we could measure the increase in women's unpaid work or their persisting underrepresentation in the digital sector, which continued to grow despite the crisis. Well, let me first underline that having this data is already a concrete result of mainstreaming. However, this data also tells us that we are not doing enough. COVID not only showed that women disappear during crisis, but that they disappear more. I strongly believe that gender equality cannot be a niche in public policies. As the timely report by the European Court of Auditors shows, we need gender objectives, analysis, data monitoring that are applied systematically across the board. And having data makes us even more accountable for coming up with targeted responses, like, for instance, active labor market policies that must counter occupational and vertical segregation. Also, investment in care services must consider that women are doing most of the care work, both paid and unpaid, which will increase over time. or investment in digital competences must include positive action measures to ensure at least a balanced participation of women and men. Therefore, the Council conclusions that we tabled and were approved last week make concrete calls for this. For gender mainstreaming throughout the implementation, monitoring, reporting and evaluation of EU funding programs and in the European semester, and for measures that consider women's situation in the labor market and the gender impacts of the pandemic. The Recovery and Resilience Facility was a critical step forward by making this approach mandatory in national plans. And all plans should include monitoring mechanisms that ensure sex disaggregated data. In fact, this element, which seems to be so self-evident, is far from being applied generally. But without data, we cannot monitor impacts on women and men. Without knowing impacts, we cannot adjust policies and budgets. In Portugal, we are taking concrete steps on which I set high expectations. Our recovery and resilience plan includes concrete objectives and targets, as well as sex disaggregated monitoring. We made it a policy commitment to have all administrative data disaggregated by sex. And also our state budget establishes that public bodies should identify which measures are to be submitted to a gender impact analysis. And for the first time since last year, our state budget has a gender perspective, including a set of impact indicators relating to equality between women and men to be monitored early in the execution of the budget. I am very pleased to say that this is the culmination of a process that we started in 2018 together with our national representative in the lobby, to whom I thank. Civil society has a major role in this process. It is critical that you mainstream your work and advocacy across policy areas and stakeholders. Gender budgeting is indeed a collective and shared objective from EU institutions to national governments and civil society at all levels. Therefore, I thank the European Women's Lobby again to making this endeavor more possible. Thank you all.
Thank you very much for your speech, for your work and consistent commitment to advancing equality between women and men. Portuguese presidency of the EU has shown, and we look forward very much to continuing working with you in the future. Finally, I'd like to give the floor to Thibaut Di Maria, who is Communications and Outreach Manager at Fundación Chanel, which advances gender equality alongside social and institutional partners worldwide. Previously, Mr. Di Maria worked in advertising agencies and as an entrepreneur in the culture sector before joining the Paris Region Agency for Gender Equality as head of communication. He teaches also gender marketing awareness at university. He is graduated from the Communication School of Paris Sorbonne University. Mr. Di Maria, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Rika. On behalf of Fundación Chanel, I'm very pleased to be here today to celebrate the launch of this wonderful work done by the European Women's Lobby. As a corporate foundation that supports gender equality and the advancement of women and adolescent girls as agents of change in society, we deliberately tirelessly encourage our peers to channel more funds to women and girls. This is why we have been supporting the European Women's Lobby for the past 3 years when they seek to mobilize long-term resources for women's rights in Europe through increasing the capacity of women's organizations to do gender-responsive budgeting analysis. All of us who are working on gender equality issues are aware of the scarcity of dedicated resources for women's rights. Movements take time and patience. They need sustainable multi-year funding to support long-term planning. When it comes to funding, research conducted by the OECD shows that only 16% of global philanthropic flows are targeted at the specific needs of women and girls, and that only 1% of these funds directly supports local women's rights organizations. In Europe, 58% of European foundations allocated less than 10% of total expenditures to women and girls in 2015. And much of this limited funding is short-term in nature. Budgets are tools in transforming our societies, but budgets can discriminate. We want to prevent and change this. Traditionally, most OECD countries did not design public policies with gender equality as a primary consideration. Today, many disparities and inequalities between the sexes appear to have become embedded to a greater or lesser extent in the baseline of public policies and the allocation of public resources. Research shows that the negative impacts of this legacy are evident across many policy domains, including labor market, education, and health outcomes, as well as gender disparities in management and leadership. Gender budgeting is one of the solutions, a powerful tool to address these issues. A tool that could seem quite technical, but that can be summarized easily. Adopt gender lens when building your budget. For example, there is a fascinating debate in many countries, including outside the EU, about post-COVID infrastructure improvements. Gender budgeting in this case would involve thinking about how we will define essential structure and how that might be different from how infrastructure was defined in the past. Is childcare infrastructure or is it not? How can we create infrastructure budgets that take into account women's lived experience and particularly the lived experience of low-income women? Of course, that is easier said than done. That is why the digital platform and toolkit that we are celebrating the launch today is so essential. It gives us, foundations, institutions, organizations, some keys to unlock economic barriers, one of the roots of gender inequalities. As I was saying previously, as a grant maker, our role goes far beyond simply providing funding. As a funder, we aim to promote and nurture ecosystems of robust non-profit organizations and their leaders who are working at the forefront of gender equality and advocating for sensible systems and policy change. Let me praise again the work of the European Women's Lobby on the promotion and dissemination of the gender budgeting processes, and I'm now looking forward to listening to the panels to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Di Maria, for your words and for the invaluable support that Fondation Chanel has provided to EWL, our members, and to women's civil society across Europe. We very hope to continue our fruitful collaboration with you. With that, I would like to thank all of our keynote speakers once again, and now pass the floor to EWL Policy and Campaigns Officer, Asha Allen.
Thank you very much to our President Reka, and thank you very much to all of our keynote speakers. We're very grateful for your inspiring words. And I am here today to very quickly introduce the next session of our launch. And we will be benefiting from 2 presentations from eminent experts on the topic of gender budgeting. First, we have Dr. Elizabeth Klatzer, a feminist economist and gender budgeting expert, who will be taking us through a presentation on what is gender budgeting, who are the stakeholders, and why it is necessary to ensure equal participation of public funding between women and men. And this will be followed by a presentation from researcher of gender mainstreaming for the European Institute of Gender Equality by Helena Masrea, and she will be outlining defining the gender budgeting tools and what they bring in terms of long-term efforts for advancing gender equality. So I hand over the floor first to Dr. Elizabeth Klatzer. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and congratulations to this great event and to the platform. So I was asked to elaborate what is gender responsive budgeting. Well, a lot has already been said. It's a strategy and practice of ensuring that budget policies and public finance management fully contribute to reaching gender equality and women's empowerment. And GRB offers very many practical tools and instruments on how to do it. By now, nobody can say, I don't know what it is and how I shall do it. And actually, the platform that is launched today contributes greatly to the available material. And I congratulate the European Women's Lobby for it. Also, the European Institute for Gender Equality has elaborated very great, very concrete tools to apply gender budgeting in the EU budget process. And just let me briefly remark that EIGE, the EU Institute for Gender Equality, has done so, even though it is one of the least funded agencies within the European Union. By the way, there is an issue for the European Commission to change this situation, because that's not good gender budgeting if the one institution working on gender equality receives so little funds. Another aspect of gender responsive budgeting is that it needs to be implemented well. And it's not enough to add gender and stir. Of course, GRB is defined as by the very much used definition of the Council of Europe, incorporating gender equality perspectives in all policies at all levels and all stages. And so it is integrating gender, but this is not enough. It also means restructuring both the public expenditures and revenues, and looking at whether revenues are sufficient in order to promote gender equality, whether expenditures are sufficient in any policy area. And this actually is the aspect which is often forgotten. It's about deep changes in budget allocations and enlarging the fiscal frame to have enough money for gender equality. So it is structural changes, and I will come back to that. Actually, I like to cite Janet Stotsky from the International Monetary Fund by defining gender responsive budgeting. She says gender responsive budgeting is good budgeting. So it's good budgeting, and we need to think about what is that. And it's, for example, imperative to look at not only adding gender equality, tracking gender equality, or putting perspectives in, but the ultimate test is actually, is there substantial advancements in gender equality? It's not enough to track equality expenditures once the budget is kind of decided and it doesn't have firm targets on gender equality. The EU money in the Corona context has been cited, the RRF, Recovery and Resilience Funds. And actually, it's great to hear that the tracking instrument is being elaborated. And that is a good example of a gender budgeting tool. But if at the level of deciding about funds, there is clear targets for climate change, clear targets for digital expenditures, both in terms of clear percentages of what the expenditures need to be. And if you want to do good gender budgeting, you cannot get around, but you need to define clear targets on expenditures. So why isn't there a 37% of gender equality expenditures out of the RRF? Or at least at 20% for gender equality and women's empowerment? That actually would be full gender budgeting. Another aspect which I think is crucial and sometimes forgotten is that the twin track approach is needed in doing gender budgeting. A gender budgeting approach needs both a full mainstreaming, gender equality being fully integrated in the regular programs and budgets, but at the same time targeted expenditures to fund specific, review specific inequalities or fund gender equality priorities. And there has been much said about funding CSOs, for example, who work on that, or specific targeted programs. And here I come to another aspect of gender responsive budgeting, which often is forgotten. And I come back to that. It's the structural change is needed, a reprioritization of funds. Coming out of Corona, it's very evident. What is needed is care to improve the economy, to restructure the economy. So you would think a focus in doing gender budgeting, everybody who says he or she is or they are doing gender budgeting would have a focus on care investments. Looking actually at what is happening now, we do not see this progress, neither at EU level nor in many member states, Portugal being one of the notable exceptions of that, and possibly others. So, and of course, it's evident to really go throughout the whole budget process, but in order not to put the cart before the horse, gender budgeting needs to start with these priorities and these commitments in terms of funding. Next aspect, actually, I was asked to briefly touch is who are the stakeholders? Of course, the actors normally involved in programming and budgeting. However, it needs much more. And it has already been touched upon the European Court of Auditors, who has done great work now recently to show that the budgetary commitments are not yet there where the words are. So it's very important to have strong monitoring. So supreme audit institutions are very important, but also all institutions in the public sector, including especially gender equality institutions. However, still, that's not enough. It's always crucial to have civil society. And thank you very much, Di Maria, who has already mentioned that. Civil society to be included and also researchers to be included. And let's be frank, even states, institutions, EU talking about gender responsive budgeting is not really doing it if it's not investing enough money in research and civil society organizations who are working on gender budgeting and working on gender equality. And actually, if we look at EU funds, of course, there is small parts devoted to gender equality, but it's not what you would expect for doing gender responsive budgeting, namely assuring that it's sufficient and a large share, for example, of funds devoted to economic research, feminist economics, care research. If you do gender budgeting, it should be funded equally. Same for civil society. So, what we need is actually commitments in terms of, in order to say it's really gender responsive budgeting, what is needed is the commitments in terms of the money and in terms of changing policies. And as we see today, it's all here. It is about taking it seriously and making a huge step forward. And it requires reprioritization of what is the economy and especially what is the budget funding. I wish you all the best, and we have all the tools here thanks to EWL, so we can go about to continue and improve work to make it effective in terms of reaching gender equality.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for outlining for us concretely what gender budgeting is, and for your excellent insights and your passion and examples of gender budgeting in practice, but also the stakeholders and the commitments that we need. Thank you for setting the scene so well for us. And now we move to our next presenter, Helena, who is from the European Institute of Gender Equality, and I pass the floor over to you.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much, of course, to previous participants, to the European Women's Lobby for inviting EIGE to this launch. It's a pleasure for me to be here today with all of you. Yes, I'll be using some slides, so please, next slide. Thank you. I would like to start by introducing briefly EIGE's gender mainstreaming platform, which is a toolbox that EIGE put forward to support EU institutions and the member states in the implementation of gender mainstreaming. It includes information on many different policy areas, presenting gender inequalities in each area and details regarding current objectives and priorities at EU, but also international level. It also presents country-specific information outlining EU member states' progress in mainstreaming gender, good practices coming from member states or the EU level, detailed information about methods and tools for gender mainstreaming, and step-by-step toolkits for gender mainstreaming, one of which I will present more in depth shortly. Next slide, please. Thank you. So, we all agree that gender mainstreaming in a policy area requires both addressing the issue of representation of women and men in the given area as decision makers and policy implementers, and also integrating a gender perspective to the content of the different policies. The consideration of how gender relates to the content of policy measures allow us then to gain a better understanding of how women and men in their different life realities would benefit from those specific measures. A close look to the inclusion of gender perspective into the content of policies show that effective implementation of gender mainstreaming requires preparation and organization. And here, people in decision-making positions can make a particular difference because they have power to introduce changes. Key elements or enabling conditions to consider are implementation plans to be in place on gender mainstreaming, structures, resources, human resources, financial resources, accountability mechanisms, knowledge generation, gender expertise, and stakeholders' involvement. There was already a reference to the involvement of civil society organizations and academia, for example. And then the next step is the how to do it. And here is where gender mainstreaming tools come into action, which are exactly types of means to put the gender mainstreaming strategy into practice. Different methods and tools can be used at the different stages of the policy cycle to mainstream the gender perspective. So at the very beginning, in the defined stage or of the cycle, for example, the gender analysis is one of the most common used methods and tools together with gender impact assessment, which can also be used at a later stage and expose gender impact assessment. And ultimately, gender mainstreaming contributes to good governance by enabling better policy making, better functioning institutions, and more effective processes. Next slide, please. At gender mainstreaming platform, in the platform, there is, no, the previous one, please. Yeah, well, it doesn't matter. We will stick with this. Yeah, okay, thank you. So in the platform, there is a section on EIGE's own toolkits, which give policymakers and practitioners on gender equality, gender mainstreaming, step-by-step guidance in a range of areas essential for gender mainstreaming. EIGE has developed a toolkit on gender equality training, another one on gender impact assessment, a toolkit on institutional transformation towards gender mainstreaming, a toolkit for gender equality in academia and research, it's called the GEAR tool, a toolkit on gender-sensitive parliaments, and the most recent one, which is on gender budgeting, and supports the practical implementation of gender mainstreaming in the EU funds. This toolkit provides recommendations and good practices. And it's important for us to mention that it's not legally binding on any EU or national entities involved in the implementations of the EU funds. Before I give more concrete information on this toolkit, a short update here. EIGE is currently updating the GEAR tool to align it to the requirements of Horizon Europe. And at the same time, we are developing a toolkit on gender responsive public procurement, which will be available early next year. Next slide, please. We go now to EIGE's gender budgeting toolkit. I think yes. This slide has some animation. Yes, okay. So our toolkit offers practical guidance to make the operational principle of gender equality or the gender equality provisions of the European Union Funds 21-27 regulations to make them operational. So it has been tailor-made. The toolkit has been tailor-made to support managing authorities, intermediate bodies, and gender equality bodies, and also staff working with the EU funds at EU level. It's aligned with the EU regulatory framework on gender mainstreaming and on the EU funds. And the 11 tools support the implementation of gender budgeting in the national and regional programming process, but also at the level of implementation, national and regional implementation, including the project level, and of course at the reporting, monitoring, and evaluation stages. And more concretely, the tool offers guidance to analyze gender inequalities and women and men's different needs in EU funding programs, operationalizing gender equality in the EU funds policy objectives and specific objectives or measures. In the terminology of EU funds, this means the partnership agreement and the programs of the different EU funds. It also offers guidance for coordination between the EU funds to advance work-life balance, for a gender responsive proposal for partnership and multi-level governance of the EU funds, specific guidance on the development of qualitative and quantitative indicators for advancing gender equality, for defining gender-sensitive project selection criteria and signing the agreements with project implementers, which are also gender responsive, tracking resource allocations for gender equality, mainstreaming gender equality into project design. Then we look into evaluation and monitoring processes from a gender perspective and report on resource spending for gender equality. It is fully aligned with the programming and operational cycle of EU funds and 21-27, and it highlights good practices from member states, pinpoint links to relevant EU funds regulations. So next, please. This toolkit is now available in 22 EU languages in PDF format. This is what we briefly saw was a picture of the PDF version in English. It has been now translated into 22 EU languages, and there is also an online version which is available in 5 EU languages. And here I just want to spend 1 minute to also let you know that complementing the toolkit or complementing tool 4 of the Gender Budgeting Toolkit, which looks at coordination and complementarities between the funds to advance work-life balance, EGE has released a specific model for gender-responsive interventions on work-life balance using the EU funds. And here, EGE presents innovative practices to realize the potential of the ESF Plus and the ERDF to promote work-life balance in the EU. Just to give you some information, out of the 143 measures presented within the ESF Plus and the ERDF as possible interventions for the next programming period, only one focuses specifically on work-life balance. But many measures can contribute to implement work-life balance if gender equality is properly mainstream. So the model provides step-by-step guidance and helps reshape investments to achieve gender equality and care systems. Let's say resilient care systems, or that care systems are taken into account when looking at investments, as it was mentioned before by Elizabeth as well. Next slide, please. Thank you. So why to use these tools, all the practice, the guidance that is proposed to implement gender budgeting and gender mainstreaming, or budgeting as a gender mainstreaming tool? Of course, the main reason was already mentioned by Elizabeth, because gender budgeting is good budgeting. And we know that the gender analysis of investments and budgets permits to demonstrate either ex ante or ex post the degree to which the budget has addressed the distinctive needs of diverse groups of women and men among the target groups of the interventions, taking into account their gender roles, the challenges and barriers faced by those in the target groups who have not accessed services, in particular women and men from more disadvantaged groups, including minority groups across the EU and its member states. The degree to which the budget has reduced, exacerbated, or left unchanged gender inequalities, the relationship or the disconnection between gender equality policies and budgetary decisions on investments, allowing, so the data, the results of the gender budgeting, gender analysis of the budget process allows for addressing the chronic underinvestment of gender equality and translating political commitments into action. It also shows how the budget and relation policies can take into account the different participation rates of women and men in the care economy. And here the aim is to achieve the 3 R's, the recognition, reduction, and equitable redistribution of care work. And finally, a budget analysis allows the identification of the changes, transformation to budget allocations and related policies that are necessary to contribute to gender equality. So in a nutshell, gender budget analysis contributes to transparency and accountability on investments, budget distribution, and impacts, which are the central principles of good governance, together with participation, involvement of stakeholders was mentioned before, also in my presentation, as another key element of good governance and indivisible part of gender budgeting work. So in this sense, EGE congratulates the European Women's Lobby and welcome its dedicated website to gender budgeting, because surely it will contribute to our common goal of advancing gender equality. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Helena, for giving us that overview and sharing with us your expertise and outlining the incredible tools that EIGE has already developed. And just as you said, we very much hope that the tools that you have developed and what we are going to launch today will complement one another and continue to support each other's work. So with that, we bring to a close our Setting the Scene session. I hope this has been very informative for all of our participants following us live in the Zoom and also live on YouTube. And now it is the moment we have been waiting for. We are going to move to the launch of our platform. So once again, we thank you for joining us here today to mark this occasion, and to our speakers who've given their insights to help us launch our new platform today. We're very excited to bring this to you. Before we officially launch, we want to take a few moments to tell you about the project that led to the development of this new and exciting platform dedicated to gender budgeting. Over the last 3 years, the European Women's Lobby has been working with our members on our project, channeling resources into women's rights, which has been supported by Foundation Chanel. In Europe, as already outlined, only 8 member states have included a legal duty to implement gender budgeting or conduct impact assessments in their frameworks. And even in these 8 member states, this is not done in a systemic way. And this is despite the commitment in the EU treaties to put gender mainstreaming into all EU activities, and the fact that gender budgeting is an essential tool in advancing equality between women and men, and this is simply not good enough. As we've heard, gender budgeting is good budgeting, as it takes into account how the budget impacts on the different needs of women, men, girls, and boys. Therefore, our project aimed to facilitate the environment for a broader adoption of gender budgeting across Europe. We achieved this through creating targeted capacity building opportunities for EU decision makers, the philanthropic community, and women's civil society, all of whom play a crucial part in socializing gender budgeting across Europe. And we conducted these sessions, plus extensive advocacy and awareness raising actions between 2019 and right up until today. To aid us in this journey, the EWL convened the Gender Budgeting Expert Working Group, a formation of the most eminent experts in the field of gender mainstreaming, gender budgeting, and feminist economics in Europe, to guide us and to co-develop essential elements of this project. So it's our pleasure to introduce these experts today to thank them for their incredible work. First of all, we have Clara Berglund, who is Secretary General of the Swedish Women's Lobby and board members of the Swedish Gender Equality Agency. She has been engaged in the Swedish Women's Lobby annual gender equality review of the state budget for the last 8 years and is part of the expert group within the government's Commission on Gender Equal Life Cycle Incomes. Next, we have Marianne Booker, who is the Executive Vice President in the International Alliance of Women and represents the IAW as a board member to the EWL. She has been a gender budgeting consultant in many countries and an expert since 1993. Since 2002, she has held a seat in the German Berlin Land Gender Budgeting Steering Group and is the co-founder of the European Gender Budgeting Network. We now move to Emma Rich, who is the Executive Director of Engender, an expert in the area of women and the economy, men's violence against women, gender mainstreaming, and women's human rights. She is a member of several entities, including the First Minister's Advisory Council on Women and Girls and the Human Rights Consortium in Scotland. Next, we have Ana Sophia Fernandez, who's the president of the Portuguese Platform for Women's Rights and former EWL vice president, as well as member of the EU-UN Spotlight Initiative Civil Society Global Reference Group. Since 2018, she has been leading a team of the Portuguese Platform for Women's Rights, which has been providing technical assistance to the Portuguese state in implementing a pilot project on gender budgeting in the state budget. We also have Dr. Elizabeth Klatzer, whom we had the pleasure to hear earlier today, a feminist economist who has more than 20 years experience working in research, advocacy, and consultancy in the field of gender responsive budgeting. She is an expert in feminist economics and economic policy, including authoring gender impact assessments for the European Parliament and working with the European Commission. Next, we have Dina Loden. She is the founder of the SEF Foundation and Romanian Women's Lobby and current executive committee member to the European Women's Lobby. Dina has extensive experience as a feminist economist, as a professor, and as an advocate for gender mainstreaming and eradicating women's poverty, having co-authored several important training manuals and courses on the evaluation of public policies and gender mainstreaming. And lastly, we come to Janet Veach, who is the chair of the UK Women's Budget Group and she has worked for UK Ministers for Women for several years as head of gender mainstreaming with a remit across all government ministries, and is the director of the UK Women's National Commission and has been advising ministers on gender equality for many years. So with their guidance and expertise, our project built the capacity of many stakeholders across Europe, which is particularly significant during this period of economic recovery. So we wanted to give this moment to thank each and every one of you for your contributions, for your expertise. And if we could all show a round of applause, a virtual round of applause for all of these experts, that would be great. We really want to extend our thanks to these incredible women. We also want to thank our EWL members who mobilized in coordinating advocacy actions on EU financial instruments and supported important awareness-raising actions across Europe, helping us to place gender mainstreaming and gender budgeting high on the political agenda. Throughout the project, however, it became clear that there was a need to develop accessible resources to support civil society in their actions on advocating for gender budgeting and being accountable stakeholders within the implementation process. More so, there was a need for a centralized place to access these resources and to have concrete advocacy tools that were desperately needed. Therefore, we are very proud to launch for you today, genderbudgeting.eu.
Genderbudgeting.eu is a brand new website dedicated to demystifying and simplifying gender budgeting as a tool of gender mainstreaming in Europe. As a platform, genderbudgeting.eu brings together into one place essential capacity building tools and resources that answers questions such as, what is gender budgeting and why is it important? How should financial institutions implement gender budgeting? And what knowledge or actions are needed to move forward? Who are the stakeholders? And what is the advice or lessons learned of gender budgeting experts and advocates? With these tools, the European Women's Lobby aims to specifically support women's civil society in their advocacy efforts to better socialise and increase the implementation of gender budgeting within their countries, at regional level and across Europe. Civil society organisations are essential stakeholders in ensuring that a feminist approach to our economies is widely adopted and ensuring that Europe works to build an inclusive economy for the well-being of all, and gender budgeting is an essential part of that. To support in this vital work, the website includes step-by-step guides, successful stories, interviews, and articles from our experts outlining their experiences, as well as in-depth explanatory guides, such as how to initiate a gender budgeting analysis. The website also hosts concrete advocacy tools, such as model advocacy letters, adaptable key messages and downloadable visuals to support your awareness-raising activities, stakeholder maps and capacity-building videos and presentations, as well as an extensive resource library. We have also developed a civil society toolkit, which is available directly for download on the platform that goes into all of these tools in more depth. Though this website has been developed to primarily aid civil society in their actions, we also hope it proves to be a vital resource for other essential stakeholders, such as financial decision makers, researchers, and private companies in the future. As the platform grows, with more tools and stories added, these stakeholders can learn much more about how to adopt and implement gender budgeting within their work. So we invite you now to join us in the feminist transformation of our economies and our budgets. Visit our new website to learn more about how gender mainstreaming, gender budgeting, and how it applies to your area. Explore the website and use our tools to support your actions. And share with us your stories and experiences. It is more important than ever that all stakeholders commit to investing in achieving women's rights and ensuring that every euro is spent meeting society's values. So join us in calling for a feminist Europe that places economic equality at its heart.
Thank you very much for watching our launch video. And actually, the time for you to get involved is here with us already. Right now, a link is being posted in the chat of this webinar, and this will take you directly to our brand new gender budgeting toolkit, which brings together all of the tools that you will find on the website, which we invite you to explore, to share with us your thoughts and feedback in the coming days. But right now, you can join us in a viral download of the toolkit. So you simply click on the link in the chat, and in a few moments, we will launch a countdown for you so that you can download the toolkit and share on social media and let everybody know that you are participating in our live launch today. Don't forget to use the hashtags gender budgeting and channeling resources. And thank you very much for taking part in the initial part of our launch today. Stay tuned for the upcoming high-level panel discussion that will discuss the state of play when it comes to gender budgeting in Europe, the opportunities, and more concretely, how this tool of this new platform will contribute to these efforts. So join us now in our viral download, and we'll be right back in just 4 minutes. Thank you very much to everyone who participated in our viral download. I now hand over to our colleague Mary Collins, who will host the next panel discussion. Sorry, Mary, you are muted.
Sorry about that. Sorry, I'll start again. So I just was saying a good afternoon to you all and a very warm welcome to this panel discussion, which I'm very honored to moderate with 4 distinguished panelists representing political and institutional actors and stakeholders. And I will introduce them to you in a few moments. Just want to say, first of all, that the launch of our gender budgeting platform and this panel discussion are very timely. We are gradually emerging from a pandemic, which has been very costly in terms of human lives, socially, economically, and above all, a backlash to women's rights in Europe. We know that the consequences will be long-term and that they will impact women more. Is this being addressed? Yet we're also at a moment of opportunity because for the first time in the history of the European Union, a collective recovery stimulus plan is on the table under the auspices of Next Generation EU, and in which the European Commission is the broker on the financial markets. And we're seeing that the funds are being mobilized, which shows that investors trust the European institutions and the values which they stand for. And equality between women and men is very central to those values. However, we can also say that Next Generation EU is not called that for nothing, because indeed it will be the next generation that will be managing the payback, because the ultimate date is 2050. So, which means that the children that are born today will be managing this in their adult lives. Therefore, it's crucial that gender budgeting is integrated now. The European Union has also adopted its 7-year budget, the multi-annual financial framework, in which some advances were made regarding gender mainstreaming. So in theory, we should have everything in place to make gender budgeting a reality moving forward. But have we? So these are the issues we will explore and discuss with our 4 distinguished panelists. We will take a perspective over time. We look at the past, the present, and the future. So before I introduce the panelists, I'd just like to invite those participating to use the question and answers box and to indicate to whom they wish to address a specific question, if this is the case. We should have around 10 minutes at the end to exchange and to have a discussion. So it's my pleasure to introduce to you our first guest, Marietta Spinderlegger, from the European Court of Auditors. Mariette is the principal manager at the Court of Auditors and started her career as finance analyst in the public sector banking in Austria. She joined the European Court of Auditors in 1997 as an auditor and worked as the head of a private office of a member and the court president. During her secondment to the Austrian Court of Audit, she worked as an international expert and head of department responsible for auditing EU funds. She is currently the principal manager in Chamber 5 of the European Court of Auditors. And just to say that Chamber 5 is responsible for financing and administrating the union. She holds a master's degree in business and economics and an MBA in public auditing. So our second speaker is MEP, member of the European Parliament, Margarita Marques, who is a member of the European Parliament since 2019. Margarita is also chair of the Committee on Budgets, member of the Committee on International Trade, and the Committee on Economic and Monetary Affairs. One of her main responsibilities has been the MFF, the Multi-Annual Financial Framework, of which she was the co-rapporteur for the S&D Group. She is currently a member of the European Parliament's Recovery and Resilience Facility Working Group. And prior to this, she was a member of Parliament and State Secretary for European Affairs in Portugal. She was also a commission official and civil servant. and holds a degree in mathematics, statistics, and a master's in education science. Our third speaker will be Reika Horvat. I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly. And Reika is Deputy Head of Unit in the European Commission in the Recovery and Resilience Task Force. She is in the unit dealing with the recovery and resilience plans for the countries of Austria, Germany, Ireland, Malta, and Portugal. The unit is also responsible for policy areas, social affairs, education, and health. And this wide policy area also encompasses questions of equality, inclusion, and stakeholder consultation. Reika holds a PDH in economics from the University of Barcelona and London. And then our fourth panelist, and I'm very pleased to introduce, is Vanda Josinian, and I hope I'm pronouncing your name, apologies for the pronunciation, from the Lithuanian Women's Lobby, who is a gender equality expert with more than 22 years experience, both nationally and internationally, and is an affiliated lecturer in the Gender Economic Laboratory of the Mykolas Romeris University. Her priorities are women's economic empowerment, gender mainstreaming, women in employment and business, the gender pay gap, institutional mechanisms for women's advancement, women in decision-making, and gender impact assessments. So I'm sure that you will agree with me that we have a very distinguished set of panelists with us today. So I'm going to start, first, we're going to look at the past. We're going to go to the past because in order to know where we're going, we need to know where we have come from. And the role of auditing in this is very important. So the recent report of the European Court of Auditors on gender mainstreaming in the EU budget provides an excellent record of where we're coming from, where we're at, and in this case, the figures and the facts don't lie. So I'm going to turn to Margriet, and I'm going to probably give you a bigger challenge than you had than auditing the EU budget. And I'm going to invite you to give a 5-minute overview of your findings in the most recent report. We can see that gender budgeting varies considerably across Europe, and therefore we need to know more about what's happening within the European budget itself. So from your perspective, could you tell us about your recent work in the area and what lessons you have drawn from your experience? So you have 5 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mary. And I agree, this is quite a challenge for me to do it within 5 minutes. First, let me say a good afternoon to all of you, and particularly thank you for this kind invitation and the opportunity to be with you today. It is a big pleasure for me to present to you our audit report on gender mainstreaming. It's in fact only about a month ago that we, the European Court of Auditors, published this special report. And I think I probably don't need to say much about our role as independent external auditor of the EU. Let me just mention that our main auditee is the European Commission, who is ultimately responsible for the implementation of new budget. And this is, as you may later hear, therefore the one to which we made our recommendations and on which we concentrated our work in our audit. So first, why did we do this audit? Well, we had several reasons. One was that, of course, gender equality is a fundamental value of the EU, and the EU has made several high-level and long-standing commitments in that respect. Second, there has been a very, very strong call from our stakeholders, including in particular the European Parliament, but also from the Council's side. Third, we had the impression in our view that the timing was right, as we stood at the end of one MFF and the beginning of a new one, with significant amounts to be spent in the years to come. And this is now particularly true with the Next Generation EU instrument and its main component, the Recovery and Resilience Facility. So what did we audit? Well, in our audit, in view of these high-level commitments, we wanted to see whether the EU's MFF, the multi-annual financial framework, as well as its annual budgets, do integrate a gender perspective in practice. We also wanted to know if the Commission can demonstrate results of the main EU funding programs on gender equality. So we looked at the old MFF and at the preparation phase of the new one. all in all, we covered 5 funding programs, and with that, about 66 of the previous MFF. We also analyzed legislative proposals for the NGU instrument, including the Recovery and Resilience Facility, which popped up as we went along with our audit work. And we thought that there's no chance for us to miss that part, that important element. So now, what did we find? Well, overall, we found that the Commission has not yet lived up to its commitment to gender mainstreaming into the EU budget. For the old MFF, it had not put the necessary institutional framework and mechanisms in place. There was no binding strategy, there was no plan for implementing and monitoring gender mainstreaming properly. We noted that little attention has been paid to gender analysis. Sex disaggregated data was either not existing, but where it was largely not used, that there were only few explicitly gender-related objectives and even fewer indicators, that there was not yet a system for tracking funds supporting gender equality, contrary to other horizontal priorities, just to name climate. And we also saw that so far the Commission has made little information available on EU budget's contribution and impact on gender equality. However, we also saw the requirements were set out in detail, that these facilitated the incorporation of gender equality into programs. So still, we saw that particularly the new Commission has taken important steps forward. It has adopted a new gender equality strategy. There is now a Commissioner with overall responsibility for equality, including gender equality, a task force to support the mainstreaming.
I think we're losing you a little bit.
Sorry. Shall I?
So, okay, thank you very much. So maybe you'd just like to finish, and then perhaps we'll talk about the recommendations in a second round of questions.
Yes, absolutely. Just to make the point that we saw with the new Commission that there have been major steps being taken forward, but still it's important to see how much that shows up in practice.
Great. Thank you very much indeed. And indeed, as you say, it's extremely timely. It's come at a moment where we're at the crossroads, the pandemic, but also the new multi-financial framework, and also the stimulus recovery plan as well. So it was absolutely extremely timely. And I think you pointed out exactly some of the issues that were raised earlier on today. We talked about tracking, talk about setting targets, having institutional frameworks on board, and having different actors as well on board. So thank you very much for that. We'll come back on the second round when we're looking more towards the future. So we're going to move to the present now, and obviously we'll be dipping a little bit into the future as well. And I'd like to invite Margarita Marques to come on board as well, and to also give you this challenge of a 5-minute overview of this extraordinary work that you have been doing and championing for the last year, or since you've arrived really at the European Parliament. You have showed really incredible perseverance, and we've all worked very closely with you. So again, I'd like to ask you what, just an overview of your work. I know 5 minutes is extremely limited for everything you've done, and also about the lessons that you have learned. Because as we see, gender budgeting varies considerably, and now the report as well shows that we don't have the mechanisms in place as well. So we'll be very interested to hear from you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for the invitation, and congratulations for this initiative. For me, it's very interesting to be here because we are with the author of the ECHO report that now I used a lot of times in meetings with the Commission, namely in the RRF working group. I already used, I think, 2 or 3 times your report. It's very important and it's very useful. And it's also a pleasure to be with RECA. So it means that you have a responsibility in the RRF task force. So it means that you both, all of us together, we have a responsibility. First of all, in the decision on the how gender balance must be treated in the framework of the MFF and in the RRF, in the development of the next generation EU, and this is very, very important. And how can we work with this responsibility, with these compromises? It's why, yes, Mary, it's very timely, this initiative. So, first of all, I'd like to share with you that in our first negotiation meeting, trilogue, I introduced the point on gender balance. And immediately, the German presidency reacted saying, gender balance, no. I was a bit astonished because I know the German position. Clearly, they are in favor of gender balance. They have a lot of politics in the development of the gender balance. So I was a bit astonished. So a negative reaction. But this negative reaction had a concrete reason. That's an explanation. It means one member state was against to use the word gender balance. They demand, they accept the principle, but not as gender balance, but as equality, women and men. I imagine that immediately we can understand which country I'm speaking about, but until the end of the negotiations, and I think we had 11 or 13, something like this, trilogue, it was a lot, and it was almost maybe the last point that the Parliament could accept, not use the expression gender balance, but equality, women, men. And if you read the regulation, you can read equality, men and women, and not gender balance. Having said this, I think that we need to be aware which is the trend, which is the situation in the European Union on that point. But this problem solved, I think that yes, we can note that we had good achievements during the negotiations concerning gender equality. So, as you know, the Parliament achieved a lot of gains in MFF negotiations. We now have gender equality as a horizontal principle for 2021-2027. As Mary remembered in the beginning, gender equality is one of the Europeans' fundamental values, as set on Article 2 and 3 of the Treaty of the European Union, and it refers to the principle that rights, responsibilities, and opportunities of women and men should be the same. We achieved also in the interinstitutional agreement to set 1st January 2023 as a deadline for the Commission to implement a gender mainstream methodology to measure the relevant expenditure for centrally managed programs.
Great. Yeah, we'll come to maybe that in a few minutes when we're looking at the future about how we move forward together and what those opportunities will be. But thank you so much for outlining. And I think what you've really outlined is that there's still a lot of resistance. And we may have a lot of tools, we may have a lot of tools at our disposal, reports, facts, figures. There's still a lot of resistance out there, that we shouldn't underestimate that either, that maybe patriarchal systems are still very embedded and that they are also to be challenged in terms of gender budgeting as well. I'm going to now move on to Reka, to our institutional actor from the European Commission. And you are very much in the present. I would like to say that all eyes are on you now as you are assessing the national recovery and resilience plans. So again, in 5 minutes, if you would like to give us an outline of the work that you are doing there, how you are currently assessing them, and what lessons again would you like to share with us in that process? Thank you.
Many thanks, Mary. First, I want to congratulate EWL for the launch of the platform. It is really cool. I mean, I just clicked around a little bit. I love it. I think this is going to be very useful for many, many people. So back to the RRF. As you know, as also Margarita and I explained, the RRF regulation sets as a clear objective the mitigating the effects of the crisis on women. And what does that mean in practice? Basically, member states were asked to put an explanation on how their plans address gender equality and equality for all, and how this objective is mainstreamed in the plan. And in the guidance which we give to member states, to which actually many of you contributed with advice, we asked member states to start with setting out the challenges in this area and then explain how these challenges are met, and also to provide disaggregated data as much as possible. This actually directly came from some of you as a suggestion, and then it was basically included in the guidance to member states. How did we help member states? Because the RRF is an instrument where its national ownership is very important. So it was member states who suggested their plan. They came up with reforms and investments which they wanted to include. The Commission was there to help guide the member states to comply with the regulation. And as regards gender equality and equality to all, we actually gave concrete suggestions. As it was also already mentioned, now there is a dedicated task force within the European Commission. And we used the task force for equality's help, and they basically read through all draft plans, and for each member state, they came up with a long list of suggestions on how they could mainstream the equality for all objective in the plans. And for example, I am responsible for Portugal. We have already, the Commission has already gave a positive assessment on the plan. So for example, for Portugal, the way it worked is that there was a long note of 5 pages with concrete suggestions for each component which the Portuguese authorities suggested. And we said, why don't you tweak it like this? Why don't you change it a little bit like this to become more inclusive, to promote gender equality and equality for all? And so for all member states, this note was either sent or communicated in a meeting. And to our great surprise, now that we are having the final plans, I can tell you what do we see as a result. So I want to tell you about 3 things which we see in the plans. A, the plans are very social. There is a lot of social expenditure, although there was, and I know I am talking about social expenditure and not gender, so money for gender equality, but allow me to digress a bit. So although there was no target for social spending, we see that the plans also coming from the country-specific recommendations are very social. And what does this mean? We see that there are several measures which, although they are not gender-specific, they are actually probably helping women more. Why? Because we have this very basic, strengthen social safety nets, for example, or create permanent contracts and go against the short-term contracts, create permanent contracts, create working environment which is more decent. So if we look at this ensemble of measures, we can see that women who have been for always in a much worse situation in the labor market, they will benefit from these wide measures. Okay, so this is one positive thing. The second positive thing is that several member states, unfortunately not all, actually took our advice. So you can pinpoint measures in the plans which come directly from the recommendations that member states received. What does this tell us? It tells us that actually if you give concrete recommendations, it's better than just giving abstract advice, take care of gender equality. When you say, actually do this, give more money for digitalization to female-owned companies. Or when building renovations, energy renovation, think about energy poverty, and think about women living alone, elderly women living alone, and concentrate on them. So we see several instances of these in the separate plans, and that is, I think this is quite important. And since time is running out, so this is quite important. And of course, as Mary, you said, no, we do not yet have everything, right? But I see a very positive change, and I mean, we should just go on. But that's for the second intervention. So thank you very much.
No, thank you very much. And I think you've given us a real sign of hope that so, you know, the guidance is important. I think you also pointing out to what was raised earlier on, that we actually need very clear targets. And also, as the Court of Auditors report also pointed out, we need clear targets, we need clear objectives, we need things that are clear, and that maybe the resistance from member states isn't so strong if they're told more or less what to do. That maybe that's what we need, rather than giving some guidance, but actually, you know, saying that there is an impact on every single measure that you have, and that you really need to be doing this. Because actually, at the end of the day, what we want to avoid is we're actually going to be funding and generating inequalities, because that is one of the danger if we're not looking at it closely. So thank you for that, and we'll come back to future and the plans. So it's now my pleasure to invite Vanda Jorisen from the Lithuanian Women's Lobby. And as women's civil society, we also have a huge role to play as watchdogs, advocates for change. So my question to you as well is, in 5 minutes again, to give your perception on how civil society and the feminist movement actually can get involved, and about your own experiences as well, and what kind of lessons have you drawn from those experiences. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the great honor to talk today. Trying to secure a time. First of all, I would mention that I'm really impressed by previous speakers, as they already mentioned several issues I was going to touch upon, so I'm free to skip them. One thing, another thing, I am really thankful to European institutions, in particular European Parliament, European Commission, for the requirement on gender issues to be included into recovery plans. And of course, I'm really thankful to the Portuguese presidency for the Great Council conclusions, which cover issues really experienced in practice by women. We as women organizations, we see all of these issues in reality. How the women's situation were worsened by pandemics. However, Lithuanian Women's Lobby made some sort of gender analysis of draft recovery plan of Lithuania. What I would just briefly mention a couple of conclusions. Findings were much more. However, just a couple of main conclusions are that first of all, oops, I'm so sorry. First of all, Lithuanian draft recovery plan, yes, due to the requirements, Reka Horvat, she already told what requirements were for recovery plans. Yes, draft recovery plan, indeed, Lithuanian draft recovery plan, indeed addressed quite a number of gender issues which were caused or deepened during pandemics. However, when it comes to gender mainstreaming throughout entire document, from our point of view, gender mainstreaming was neither strong nor ambitious, because gender-related issues in the descriptive part of the draft recovery plan seemed to be isolated from the entire content. So it means that insufficient gender mainstreaming throughout draft recovery plan definitely weakens the impact on combating pandemic consequences on gender equality. It's not an effective approach. Second, publicly available draft recovery plan, in that draft recovery plan, we couldn't find neither specific targets nor concrete measures specifically addressing improving women's situation. We found insufficient sex-segregated data and lack of gender-specific indicators. As it was draft, probably concrete implementing measures are not yet publicly available, and perhaps they will come later. However, lack of concrete gender-specific targets, measures, gender indicators lead to invisibility of funding and actually hides any signs of gender budgeting. It's likely that ex-ante gender impact assessment of the draft recovery plan was not carried out. And final remark was that, yeah, I'm really thankful to quite a number of speakers who already mentioned role and importance of involvement of women's civil society organizations. In the draft recovery plan, we could hardly find any mentioning or any referring to involvement of women's civil society organizations. And from our point of view, it's a disadvantage for implementation of recovery plan for its effectiveness.
Great, thank you so much for that.
So it's everything what I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that. And I think you pointed out as well that there's still a disconnect in the description of the situation of women in the national recovery plans, but there isn't targeted measures, targeted investments, if you like,
right.
that actually address that. And I think also what you said about the role of civil society and consultation. And I know in the guidance note from the Commission as well, member states were required to or requested to consult with a broad range of stakeholders. And I know that from our own membership as well, that many of our organizations felt very much left aside, also because of the timing in that of it. So thank you so much for that. Now I'm going to quickly move because I do want to leave some space at the end for some exchange for questions. Just like to remind the participants that are joining, please don't hesitate, put your questions, your comments into the question and answers section. And I think we're going to move to the future. So we've looked at the past, we've looked at the present, we're now going to look at the future. And I'm going to come back to Margit. And I want to ask you all, what do you see as opportunities and challenges moving forward? So if I come to Margit, for example, in your report on page 8, it said that gender mainstreaming is a means of achieving gender equality and says very clearly, it refers to a simple idea, that gender equality between women and men needs to be promoted actively at all stages of policy making and implementation. So I just want to ask you then, if you could highlight what recommendations you have in your report to ensure that this simple idea can be translated into achievable outcomes. So you have a couple of minutes for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, regarding the way on how to move forward, we made quite many specific recommendations. We have 6 key recommendations. Most of them are split up in sub-recommendations. So we really wanted to be specific in order to provide the Commission with guidance on where we think that steps are needed. Let me provide you some details. So in our view, the Commission should start with the institutional framework and strengthen that. This is by clarifying roles and responsibilities, drawing up implementation plans, and make training available to all staff of the Commission. Furthermore, it should update its better regulation guidelines and with a view to carry out a gender analysis. So if a Commission service does not do a gender analysis, that service should provide the reasons for not doing so. So either comply or explain. Third, we want the Commission to systematically collect, analyze, and report on sex disaggregated data which is available. There is a lot of data available. However, it's not used, it's not reported upon. We want the Commission to do that not only under direct management, but also under shared management, while noting that there it depends on the information provided by the Member States. We want the Commission to include, particularly now in future proposals, gender-related objectives and indicators. Yeah? Very often the Commission explains it's up to the legislator, but it's the Commission who makes the proposals, so the Commission should include those in its proposals. We want the Commission to develop a robust system for tracking and report on it annually, and to assess and report how gender equality has been integrated into the national recovery plans. So the good news is that the Commission has accepted all of our recommendations, either fully or partially, but the detail as always lies in the details. But to give you a few examples, so the Commission has agreed to develop a methodology, as already mentioned earlier in the interinstitutional agreement, for tracking gender-related expenditure, which it aims to test, however, only for certain centrally managed programs and only by 1st of January 23, if I'm not mistaken. The Commission has also agreed, for example, to analyze the appropriateness of proposing a percentage on how much of the EU budget should be used to support gender equality. So some sort of earmarking, like it's done for climate change. However, the Commission didn't go further than only agreeing to do an analysis whether this is appropriate or not. So we'll see. But on the other hand, please I'm happy to let you know that as a general rule, we usually follow up on our recommendations later on to check to what extent our recommendations have been implemented by our auditee. And so to put it in a nutshell, I think the title of our special reports clearly signals the big challenge it is to put the high level commitments into practice. So it's basically somehow to walk the talk. And we hope that our recommendations help to raise awareness and are supportive for the work of our stakeholders and therefore contribute to all of it. Thank you very much.
That's great. Thank you so much. And it's very heartful to hear that the Commission has accepted the recommendations. And I just want to say to you as well, don't worry, we will all be checking up to make sure that those recommendations have been implemented, are being implemented. So I now want to turn to Margarita. And as I said previously, you have been tireless in supporting gender mainstreaming in the EU budget. And collectively, we would really like to thank you for your commitment. And as I say, your perseverance as well. So while we have made some strides, there's still a long way to go, or there's still certainly some place to go yet. But so I wanted to ask you about what would be the key milestones as we work through the next MFF? We're all galvanized now, we're all energized, we're all at the forefront, but how do we maintain and sustain that energy? And what are those key milestones that we should be watching out for so that at the end of this budget cycle, that gender budgeting will become part of it and it'll become a norm and integrated naturally, so to speak, into the next cycle. So thank you for your.
Thank you, Mary. Yes, it's a huge ambition for 7 years to make progress, to be used in a better way in the future. I fully agree with you. But I mean, the European Parliament is perfectly aware of the importance of applying gender mainstreaming at all levels of the budgetary process. To use tools and to introduce changes to public expenditure and revenue to adjust for inequalities. This is all in all gender budgeting. This is a key point for us. To be more concrete, to answer to your points, we now have gender equality as a horizontal principle for 2001-2027 period. So we need to push for its implementation. We have agreed on the implementation of a gender mainstreaming methodology to measure the relevant expenditure for centrally managed programs. It means programs managed by the Commission. The way is forward. We are open to cooperate with the Commission to give inputs to implement this methodology, have it applied and measure, really know how much did EU policies contribute to gender equality. This is also important. And then, who knows, we can aspire for 2028, 2034 EU budget programmation. But beforehand, I'd like to raise a point, because I read your report, ECHA report, and in my point of view, there are three keywords that I think that we need to look to these three words. The first is monitor, because we need to monitor. The second one is report. It's not only to monitor, but you need to report and to report to the Parliament. And third one, to allow progress. Maybe the word allow is not so much strong, but it's the way that it's not to monitor and to report because we need to do it and we need to be occupied, but it's to be sure that we have progress. And this is important for the Commission because it can't be no more a bureaucratic or a formal exercise, but with an attached form as usual with the political or legislative initiatives. It means it must be a political will to achieve this ambition.
Great, thank you so much. And you're absolutely right. So there are milestones along the way. There are the annual budgets as well. And I think getting ready so that those key words can actually become meaningful. And we have, say, 7 years to work through it, but to be prepared as well in advance for the next MFF as well, which is really only around the corner. I'd like to turn to Reka. Is Reka still with us? Yes, I can see her. So just to say, Reka, again, looking forward, challenges, opportunities, you're assessing or have assessed the National Recovery and Resilience Plans. So what measures do you think the European Commission could take to encourage member states to either strengthen or even revise their investments if there is an assessment that there aren't enough investments going in to address the issue of women's rights and the sectors where women work? Thank you.
Yes, thanks. I actually want to come back to what Wanda said, because Wanda is absolutely right. But the RRF is a performance-based instrument. So now we have put in the Council implementing decision. So our proposal of the Council implementing proposal, so-called milestones and targets, which member states need to meet in order to get the next disbursement, right? As Wanda rightly pointed out, these are just a skeleton. These are by definition very high level because we couldn't put 50,000 milestones and targets. Therefore, we just put the biggest ones, and these ones don't say, you can only give this money to female-owned companies. It is not in the milestone because it would be impossible to monitor. It is in the description of the measure, but it's not in the milestone. Therefore, what is very important is that during the implementation phase, which it is coming, that this skeleton of milestones and targets should be filled the way the member states put it into their plans, and actually even better, right? Because member states didn't have that much time to think, but now we are all here and all stakeholders are here, and we can advise member states how to fill up this skeleton. And this is very important. And I come back also what Margarita said, I have different 3 words, but my 3 words would be, all stakeholders advise member states, then monitor what is going on, and then adjust if things are not going the way we want them to go. And of course, the Commission will also monitor through a delegated act the expenditure on social, and in particular on equality expenditure. But as all of us said, what we should be monitoring actually is the outcomes.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Because that's what you want to see. So I stop here.
No, thank you very much. And I think, again, you've given us signs of hope that all is not fixed, set in stone, that this is something that evolves. We can accept that it was a kind of very fast things happened, but that we need to, we can open the door. The door is still open. I think that's what we need to hear, and we need to work together. As you say, we're all sitting around the table now. Very conscious of the time because we're going to have to finish this really extremely interesting discussion fairly quickly. But I just want to ask Wanda, I mean, moving forward, you obviously have plans, you hear what the others are saying, the door isn't closed, and we really look forward to working with you as members as well of the European Women's Lobby all together. we will be ensuring that there is more robust response in the resilience plans as we're moving forward, and look forward to really working with all of you over time. So I'm just going to check if that's okay with you all, if there's any particular questions or comments in the chat box or in the questions and answers section, just to see if there's anybody that has a burning issue that they would like to ask. So maybe just check, just bear with me 1 second. So I'm in the chats now and I see, what can I see? Sorry. Well, we have to make comments. Sorry, the conference was. Okay. Okay, can I see a question here? Can the EU Commission with UN Women make its second conference on gender budgeting as it did in 2010 with all 27 finance ministers? And so is it possible for the Commission or for any of the other actors to actually organize, say in the Council of Finance Ministers, for example, to organize a discussion on gender budgeting? That certainly would bring it to the heart of all of the member states, the governments. They'll be hearing it at the same time, sharing the tools, because we have a lot of tools out there. We just now need to make it happen. So I'm just wondering if anybody would like to answer that, and I'll check to see if there's other questions as well. Okay, so I have, so that's one question. I have another question directly to Margit, and that's about the lobbying efforts. In your view, what would be the most important thing to lobby on now? What would be the main issue for us to really galvanize our strengths and our energy around now in relation to your recommendations as well?
Well, I think this is a very valid and good question, but very difficult to answer in the sense that there are somehow, you need to start from the beginning, having analysis done. In order to do proper analysis, you need the data, you need the relevant information. What we found in our audit, and I think I mentioned it, that wherever legal requirements are set, and the more detailed they are, the better, that really facilitates the incorporation of gender equality into programs. And so it really, I think, if from that perspective, it would be good to see that to the extent possible, whenever the Commission makes proposals, also from the legislator's perspective, that gender equality perspective is brought into these legislative texts. That I think is very, very helpful. We found it, for example, for the CAP. Yeah, there for the new proposals, that it was during the discussions at legislative level that a specific objective has been brought in to promote gender equality, including the participation of women in farming. And this then later on allows to follow up, to ask questions, to monitor, to report upon. So I think this way is probably one way to have impact.
Great, thank you very much. I also believe that Elizabeth Latzer would like to intervene. So Elizabeth, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to make a brief comment because I am working on the MFF since quite a time, and I think it's very important what all of you are working on and what you said, and especially Eka. Thank you so much, Margit, for doing this work and pointing it out. However, I think it's important from a researcher's perspective. I have followed gender budgeting since a long time, and I think it's very important not to get lured about words or get put to sleep about words, because we heard similar words, except such a great report, already 2-3 MFFs ago, and there was horizontal commitments on gender equality, even on gender budgeting, and it has not been implemented. So I could say a lot, but I think it's very important to really, I would say the words push, build pressure, not only on member states, sorry to say that, Reka, but the Commission actually could have done much better in the proposals on the RRF, and it was even worse than it is now, a very very blunt gender budgeting or gender equality perspective not being integrated, living up to the words or to the obligations of the treaty. Unfortunately, the European Parliament and pressure from outside could change. So what I think is at least funding for an independent gender budgeting expert committee institution for research, for accountability from outside. Otherwise, we have the same words for the next decades. And think in your professional life, how often are you going to be involved in an MFF? It's a 7-year period, so it's very rare. And then we get new promises and new things. So I have observed that already for 3 cycles, not very promising. So I think funding for civil society organizations like the EWL, funding for research, and especially for such an outside gender budgeting advisory body with concrete, very concrete tasks to monitor, build reports every year at every level, both at the Commission, at the EU level and in the member states. Sorry to be so harsh on that, but my research perspective just gives me, again, nada promises and what's in 7 years. We're about, I would guess, about the same. If we continue like that, we would have sort of a similar report. So there is a lot to do, and I'm so grateful for this event and for the tools that are available, but what it needs is funding, and the Commission could make enough funds available for that.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth, and thank you for sharing your own experience as well. And I think that this debate obviously is the first of many. We've already run out of time, and you see how we have so much to say, so much to share, so many things to strategize on. But I just want to say it's not the end. I think it's the beginning for us all. And I think we really need to work hard together on this over the next time. So I'm just going to say a few words to close this panel, just to say that I want to thank each and every one of you for your commitment. We could feel very clearly that there's a commitment for you to make gender budgeting, gender mainstreaming a reality in Europe. I think that's come across very clear. We know that the road ahead is still bumpy, but at this stage we do have a plan. And we all have a role to play, institutional, political, civil society. We have the same objective. We know we can't do this alone. We need each other. So I just think the launch of our platform today is a big step as well in helping to make this happen. And we all know that at the end of the day, political will is of the essence. Where there is a will, there is a way. So it's now time to turn words into action, to use the subtitle of the report of the Court of Auditors. And we look forward to continuing this journey together. And I now would like to hand over to our president, Reika Safrani, to say some final words. And I'd like to thank you very much. Thank you.
I would like to once again thank all of our presenters and panelists for their expert insights and for the rich discussion. As we can see, gender budgeting is a vital tool to advance equality between women and men in Europe, and the effort of all stakeholders is essential. I would also like to give additional thanks to all of our members and invitees for joining us in our launch today. And once again, to our gender budgeting working group experts, without whom none of this would have been possible. The EWL has been calling for gender budgeting for many years, even decades. I am therefore very proud today that we are here with key stakeholders to make this happen. And from today's discussions, it is clear that we now have a plan to move forward. I am very encouraged by the progress made at EU level and the positive messages to move forward together. We owe it to future generations to keep this momentum going. And looking to the future, it is our responsibility today to ensure the generations after us benefit from actions now. And so we are pleased to hear ambitions of our speakers and the progress made so far. I would like to reiterate that this is only the beginning and not the end. And we therefore invite everybody to work together to make use of the tools we have provided on the online platform and to update this as we move along on the journey together. We must keep reminding ourselves that budgets mirror political priorities. Women's rights and equality between women and men must be central to this. So we thank you all once again for joining us in our launch today and look forward to collaborating with each and every one of you in the future. Thank you.